solving quadratic equation by the quadratic formula. The quadratic formula can be used to solve any quadratic equation. It is the most versatile method of solving quadratic equation. To use the quadratic formula, the equation must be written in standard form, which is ax squared plus bx plus c is equal to 0, where a is the coefficient of the squared term, and b is the coefficient of the first degree term, or x, and c is the constant. So in this example, 3x squared plus 4x minus 5 equal to 0, your a is 3, your b is 4, and your constant c is equal to -5. To solve a quadratic equation by quadratic formula, we write the quadratic equation in standard form, which is ax squared plus bx plus c is equal to 0, and determine the numerical values of a, b, and c. Substitute the values for a, b, and c into quadratic formula, and then evaluate the formula to obtain the solution. So we need to memorize this formula then. If you haven't already, make sure to write it down, and you have a question in the back. Go ahead, please. Okay, can you turn on your microphone so everybody else can hear you?
Okay, so my question was that using the quadratic equation method, could you solve the answer about the same way as the square root method?
Good question. So let me, okay, very good question. As I mentioned at the earlier session, there are more than one way to solve quadratic equation, second order equation. One method that we learned a long time ago was factoring method. Remember when I had a second order equation, ax squared plus bx plus c is equal to 0. The very first method we learned was to factor this and let each of these parentheses be equal to 0 and solve for x. That was solved by factoring. Remember that method, right? Now, we just presented another method earlier in another session, that if I have something square is equal to a number like k, x is equal to plus and minus radical k, and we call that square root method. So that was a different method. So one method was factoring, the other method we looked at was square root method. We did a lot of examples for, if you have a problem with those, go back and view those sessions. Now, this is a different way of solving quadratic equation, which would be a most convenient way where the equation that you have is hard to factor, perhaps. Or you don't want to do that lengthy completing the square method that we did in other session. So this works for any second order equation pretty much. So as long as you identify A, B, and C. So in this case, in this example here, what is A? Can you tell me what is A in this example? A is the coefficient of x squared. So your A is equal to 1. What is B in this case? Your B is the coefficient of x, which is 2. And what is C? -8. Has to be in the standard form when we do this. So once we identify A, B, and C, we're pretty much done. We just have to substitute those values into this formula. We just have to memorize this formula and then evaluate for x. So in this case, everywhere I see B, I'm going to substitute 2 for that. Everywhere I see A, which in these two places, I'm going to substitute 1. And finally, everywhere I see C, which is only one place here, I'm going to substitute -8. So here under this radical, I get 2 squared, which is 4, and the product of these three terms would be -4 times 1 times -8 would be equal to +32. That adds up to square root of 36 here. Square root of 36 is 6. So my solution would be minus b plus and minus 6 over 2. I get two answers here, 2 and -4. Okay, if I completed the square here, I would get the same answer. If I factor this, This is factorable also, obviously, right? So if I factor this into two parentheses, that's easy to factor. I would get x, and then for 8, I'll get 2 and 4. And we want to get plus 2 out of this. So I would have plus 4 minus 2. You notice that if I say x minus 2 is equal to 0, that results into x is equal to 2, the same solution we find here. If I let x plus 4 equal to 0, that would result into x is equal to minus 4. That's equal to the second solution. So to answer your question, there are 3 methods that we're presenting here. It's really up to you. You can use either of these methods, but you have to know all these 3 methods because sometimes the question says solve by using quadratic formula. So that's the method you have to use. So you have to know this formula. Sometimes I ask you solve by completing square. Then you have to use that method. So you need to know the 3. Or sometimes you have to solve by factoring only. You cannot. You can check your answer by this formula, but you have to show these steps, the factoring method.